And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our 2018 Ag Roundtable right here on 1390 KCLN. My name is Mike Adams. I'm host of the radio program Adams on Agriculture, heard on KCLN, and very happy to be moderating our roundtable discussion this afternoon. A great group from all segments of Iowa agriculture and a little bit into Illinois as well. We're going to talk a lot of key issues. These are issues important to agriculture, important to everyone, and that's the point we want to make. Also, a reminder, it is National Farm Safety Week, so we want to urge everyone to please be very, very careful, farmers and non-farmers, anyone out on the roads. We're all sharing those roads, and it gets busy, it gets crowded, we're all in a hurry, it seems like, so we just have to kind of slow down, be patient, be observant, and work with each other. So we have a lot of folks here. Some more will be joining us as we go along. We look forward to a good discussion on a number of topics. We want to thank our sponsors, our Ag Roundtable, brought to you by Growmark FS, also brought to you by Clinton County Farm Bureau, Bunge North America, Farm Bureau Insurance and Financial Services, Iowa Biodiesel Board, the Clinton Sawmill Museum, where we are broadcasting from this afternoon, the Wild Rose Casino and Resort, where I broadcast my show from earlier today, and I want to thank them for their great hospitality, and also Homer's Deli. Thank them for the great meal we had here just a while ago. I mentioned our roundtable brought to you by Growmark FS, and I want to welcome Liz Hobart. She is the Government Affairs Manager for Growmark FS. Liz, thank you for the support of Growmark in this type of an event where we can share with people the importance of ag issues. That really, there are so many challenges right now for people in agriculture, and a chance to discuss those. Thank you very much.
We appreciate the opportunity to participate, and we value our partnerships, and we're looking forward to the dialogue today.
I want to talk a little bit about Growmark FS and your involvement in a number of issues, but especially in sustainability issues and the work you're doing in the 4R program. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I think everybody looks, when we talk about sustainability, there's a lot of different definitions. The Growmark FS system, we define sustainability as enduring over time. It's those activities, those processes, those products, those services that have a benefit to the environment from a social perspective and also an economic perspective. So within the Growmark system, we kind of endure, of course, enduring over time. So Endure is our sustainability initiative. We're probably unique in that we kind of take it from a holistic perspective. We talk about it from our agronomic, with our agronomy team, our energy, our logistics, in addition to just our investment in the communities and our talent of employees.
Well, it's a critical issue for farmers and in their operations and how they're going to manage going forward, but also there's such a critical eye on farming right now as far as what's coming out of those fields, running off those fields. So, I mean, this is an issue that's right in the spotlight right now.
So the Growmark FS system, we support the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy, and we are engaged in a lot of partnerships and a lot of collaborations. I could highlight two of those for you here from Iowa and one from Illinois. For example, in Iowa here, we have been one of the 30-plus partners in the 4R Plus initiative, and that's an initiative that was launched in February that brings how can we help at the farm gate level bring the agronomic piece with the conservation piece to our conversations at the farm gate? So the 4R Plus initiative has been great in developing resources specifically tailored towards ag retailers and the CCAs. Another effort that we're engaged in from a collaboration perspective here in the state of Iowa, the Growmark FS system has signed a memorandum of understanding with the NRCS on the national level. And as part of that national memorandum of understanding, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Iowa NRCS. And it's, again, as an ag retailer, our expertise is in the agronomic piece, but we also recognize to meet the goals of the strategy that we have to bring the conservation piece to the farm gate also. So it's helping us to try to understand what some of those are as those conversations come up with our farmers, helping to give them the resources that they need. And then the third one I would like to just highlight from Illinois perspective, we collaborate with Illinois Farm Bureau in what we call the 4R for You program. And it's basically an effort to demonstrate and investigate the in-field practices At the farm gate level, we have 12 projects in Illinois, all across the state with 11 FS member companies and 14 county farm bureaus. So it's a great way from the 4R, the infield practices, to kind of demonstrate what some of those are, working in collaboration, that farmers and ag retailers are working together.
Well, I think that's the key, the collaborative approach to deal with these kind of issues. We're joined also by Julie Kinney, Deputy Ag Secretary here in the state of Iowa. And Julie, certainly your state has been right at the forefront of these types of issues, and I think it's important that we let the public know how agriculture is addressing them.
Yeah, good point. And first of all, Mike, thanks for having me, and thanks. I look around the room and I see such great ag leaders, so it's good to have a conversation about some of these important issues. And of course, thanks to Growmark for sponsoring this. Absolutely, conservation, soil conservation and water quality are a huge part of what we do at the Department of Ag. It's a huge part of what farmers and landowners do in the state of Iowa. So Liz mentioned the nutrient reduction strategy, and we're really excited about the really successful 5 years that we've had implementing that strategy and seeing some of the fruits of that labor and the practices that have been implemented and the difference that they're making. Certainly, we've been working on soil conservation much longer than that. And earlier this year, we had the pleasure of helping to release a report with Iowa State and the Department of Natural Resources that we use LIDAR imaging to take a look at some of those conservation practices that have actually been implemented across the state. And if we put those practices and apply today's dollars to it, it was over $6 billion worth of investment that farmers and landowners have made. So I think a lot of times we get so entrenched in what we're doing in the here and now that maybe we don't stop to pause and see how far that we've come. So tremendous success. We are definitely focused on water quality here. Soil conservation still, but water quality going forward. And we've got great partners. I see many of the people here are partners in that work. We've got 250 partners across the state working in this area. So it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us supporting those farmers and landowners to do what's right.
And I think important because critics of production agriculture are looking for ways to say, look, agriculture is not doing the job, they're polluters, they're not taking care of our waters, and they're not taking care of the air. That's why it's important to show what agriculture is doing and can do it on a volunteer basis, and we don't have to have heavy-handed, federally mandated programs come down on top of us.
Amen. I think given the right tools and information and support, farmers and agriculturalists will do the right thing. And so it's really easy to point at things and say, well, it's not enough or it's not enough fast enough. But I think if we can put our collective expertise together and work on this together, we'll make a much greater impact. And we're working on demonstration projects across the state, both on the rural side of things, the farm side of things, but also on the urban side of things, because we recognize that whether you own a small piece of land in the city or in the suburbs, or you own a quarter section out in the country, there's something that you can do to help improve water quality. So again, if we all work together on this, I think we can see that we're headed in the right direction, and given the right support, we can continue that progress.
Well, that's a good point, because agriculture was the number one target on it has to be those fields, has to be the farmer. But, I mean, we all contribute to this. We're all partners in this, whether you live in town or out on the farm.
Absolutely. And we've seen that the voluntary approach makes a whole lot of sense. Secretary Nag, for example, chairs the hypoxia task force. So, in Iowa, we get a lot of focus on what we're doing that contributes to water quality downstream and in the Gulf of Mexico. And I think that's a really great example of, Secretary Nag is co-chairing that along with an EPA leader. And so we've got the regulatory side of things from the federal side, but we've got the state Secretary of Ag who's bringing the real life experience that's happening in the state to make sure that we're all working on the right things and have the right resources to help support that work.
I see we have here former Iowa Corn Growers Association President Bob Hensath. And Bob, this is something corn growers have been working on for some time now.
Yeah, this has been one of our major issues for quite a few years, and we've worked with IDALs and are in a lot of efforts with other organizations, the Pork Producers Soybean Association, through the Iowa Ag Water Alliance and those kind of things, and it's critical that we support the nutrient reduction strategy. The Senate in Iowa, or the legislature in Iowa, just gave us funding for more projects, for more to move this forward even further. Now it's critical that we get the farmers engaged. A lot have been, but we need to step up our levels. I mean, if we want it to remain voluntary, if we want it to be done the way we want to do it, we have to be the ones out there doing it. We have to engage our farmers if they're not already engaged, and get them embracing the new technologies, the new practices. Technology is going to play a huge role in moving this forward as well. I'm sure there's things out there that will be developed that will help us in this process, but it all takes funding, which we have now. So that's an important piece of it.
That is the key. I think a lot of farmers would do even more if there was some more programs, more help, more assistance available to them.
The farm that my brother lives on, we're actually working on putting a edge of field practice, a bioreactor in for a tile line. And so there's now that's going to be 75% cost share where that wasn't before. So where we can get that message out that there's the funds available and the expertise, I think in some areas we're learning as we go with some of these practices. So we have to build that knowledge base up of we feel comfortable doing them as well. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's exciting that we're starting to see more projects happening.
Also with us, David Harrison. He's a conservation specialist with the Whiteside County, Illinois Conservation Board. David, I know working with conservation folks, there's never enough funding to go around to all the things that you would like to do and that landowners would like to do.
Yeah, I really applaud Iowa's efforts. You guys are leaps and bounds ahead of where we're at. And one, yeah. Oh boy, that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is the money issue. You know, you mentioned the cost sharing with landowners. You know, we get anywhere from $15,000 to maybe $25,000 a year if in a good year. And you know, we've got 300,000 acres in Whiteside County. I have to spread that over. And basically it comes down to, we really emphasize cover crops in the county, and you know, we've pushed those because we feel that's a cost-effective way to address the nutrient problems. But those edge of field practices are important too. And right now we really don't have the funds to look that hard at bioreactors. I would hope at some point the state gets a lot more serious, like the state of Iowa did, and comes up with more of a collaborative effort. You know, I've worked with the Farm Bureau on this, I've worked with FS on it, and we're getting there, but we're still not to where you're at in Iowa. And part of the problem is the soil and water districts in the state up until this year really had their funding slashed. We're one of the few in northwestern Illinois that still has 2 employees. Everybody else was down to 1 employee or even a half-time employee. And a lot of the counties down in central and southern Illinois are still understaffed. So that's the problem. A lot of those people with experience had quit. So now we're having to hire new people, and it's going to take that much more time to get them up to where they need to be training-wise to work with landowners with these practices too. So it's kind of been a numerous things coming together for almost a perfect storm at a bad time.
You know, what I always find troubling about that, it's kind of like research or ag education. Those are some of the first targets to be cut in tough budget times, but yet those are programs and things that if you invest in them, there's such long-term benefits that you gain in the long run if you just put the money into it.
Yeah, it's like building a house and putting a really bad foundation under the house. You know, eventually it collapses. And if you don't have that structure out there to help landowners who, you know, and we have a lot more demand than I have resources to address right now. We just don't have the funding yet. Now that may change, but this past year was pretty decent, but the 5 years before that were horrible compared to what Iowa's doing. And, you know, you can see it just with the progress you guys have made. That's incredible. And like I said, I really applaud your efforts to that.
Julie, you had the national spotlight on you with the Des Moines situation, and bring us up to date where that stands now and the progress that's been made and your approach moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. I grew up in one of the counties that was at the heart of that Des Moines Waterworks lawsuit. So grew up on a farm there. I saw firsthand what it meant to the people who live in those communities. And I would say by and large, they felt like they were being attacked. And it was a hard thing to be a part of. The one positive side, I would say, out of that is it got everyone's attention. And I think, by and large, farmers are invested in this and they're doing the right thing. But I think it brought everyone to the table to realize that a voluntary approach is what makes sense, but we've got to be implementing these practices. And so farmers in those counties have embraced it. Farmers across the state have embraced it. I think we've seen that, again, when we work together toward things, it's the right type of approach. So I think we're in the clear from that, but I think no one's resting on their laurels thinking that something like that couldn't come up again, which is why it's important that we have funding, long-term dedicated funding to continue these practices. And I see Representative Momsen here. He's been tremendously supportive, as has the legislature and Governor Reynolds. The first law she signed into law when she was in practice, or it came to be governor, was Senate File 512, which does give us that long-term dedicated water quality funding. So again, it's not the last discussion we'll have about funding, but we know that we have funding coming, and we can help to plan for that and make an even bigger impact.
Let's welcome in Iowa State Representative Norland Momsen and talk about those budget battles that go on and the discussions that go on to try to get funding for projects like this.
Well, you're correct. It is a battle. In Iowa, we have a very strict budgeting rules, how much we can spend, and so the amount has to be split up amongst everybody there. I've been chair of the Ag and Natural Resources Sub-Appropriations Committee on the House side, and funding has been a big deal there. 2 years ago, we reprioritized some money within our budget for water quality. We put as much as we could towards our local conservation districts, and for personnel, we thought that's the people meet first when they have an issue or a question, is that local person at that local office. And so that was a big deal for the committee. Like I said, we reprioritized some money, and this last year with the passage of Senate Bill 512 gives us a dedicated funding for both point and non-point sources. There we go. So I think that was great, but that bill is constantly evolving. And that's been some of the criticism I've heard, but it's always the day it was signed that we've got some ideas how to modernize things, especially our local soil and water districts who have over the past been concerned with soil erosion, whereas now we're talking water quality, and so now we're talking about nitrogen. So we need to make sure we've modernized the programs to adapt to both. So and it has been a budget. Money is always an issue. That's the number one issue in Des Moines.
You mentioned a good point. I want to bring David Harrison back in. As Representative Momsen pointed out, I remember years ago, the big focus was soil conservation, and not that it's not still important. Obviously
Right.
It is. But really that emphasis and that focus has really changed to nutrient runoff from those fields, right?
Yeah, our board decided, I work for a board of 5 landowners, 3 of which are fairly good-sized farmers, and then a couple others, I don't want to say just landowners, but landowners. They don't actually farm, but they're involved in the farming industry. And several years ago, they made the decision to shift our focus to water quality. We still deal with landowners with no-till, mulch-till, rotations, things like that, but they basically mandated to myself and my other employee to, let's start working on the water quality issue. They sent me to a conference back in the late 90s down in New Orleans on the hypoxia issue. And they said they were thinking about it back then, but they really got serious the last 5 or 6 years. They said, let's start looking at some of these edge of field practices. Let's start, trying to get more cover crops out there. We do a tillage survey for the Department of Agriculture in Illinois every year, and now we're mandated to record cover crops also. And I always thought there was somewhere between 2 to 3% of the acres in the county that were under cover crops, and at least from the survey, it came out around 5%. Which is a fairly big bump. And I know Don's down the table here with Farm Bureau, and it's been my perception, at least, Don, there is more cover crops in the county than there have been in the last few years. We always had a few people that did them, and they were kind of the point of the spear, but now other people are starting to jump on board and at least try them, and there are some problems with them. I'll be the first one to admit there's problems with cover crops, but I think, there's ways we can work it out. it's gotten more challenging this year with the markets, and asking someone to put more inputs in at maybe $15 to $30 or $40 an acre can be a challenge, and I don't blame them. When you got corn that's around $3 and beans are underneath the price of break even, it's tough to make that decision. But if you look long term, I think you can justify it.